I like Syria, right? I met Syrian telecom authority engineers back in 2000 or like something like 1999. They sold SLT, right? Syrian telecom authorities. Like 20 people came to Korea and they were trained in our company's training headquarters in Daejeon. And I was dispatched to the institute to teach about outside plant technology. At the time, I was an engineer at the outside plant department, managing the daily operation of telephone installation. Back in 1997, 1998, all the way 2000, there was no internet in Korea. So mainly we focused on telephone technology. So I met Syrian people. They looked kind, but they looked strange to me because they were not Europeans. They from the Middle East, but their skin was almost white. But their facial expressions looked a little bit terrible to me because they have a very strong eyebrows. They have very strange smells, bodily smells, and I don't know. It's just Islamic, right? So different cultures, but we got along very well. I wonder how they live now. Some of them probably are dead because of age, and some of them were killed during the war. I wish everything peaceful, fine in Syria, right? Syria was the civilization a long, long time ago, 2,000 years ago. So let's find out what is going on. Assad was toppled by the people last year, and he fled to Moscow, Russia, right? 俄罗斯 in Chinese. This article is from Reuters, and the title is Syrian Army Continues Advance Against Kurdish-held towns, despite U.S. calls against it. There are many Kurdish people living in Turkey. So when I traveled to Turkey back in 2013, I met a Kurdish guy on a railroad track platform, and I asked whether he's a Turkish, but he said, "No, I am Kurd." I said, "What?" "I am Kurd." He was very proud of Kurdish heritage, but he seemed to hate Turkey. So I knew that there is something going on between Turkey people and Kurdish. And later I found out that because of the war, Kurdish people were used to, to fight against Syria with a false promise by the U.S. to establish their own country within Syria. But Turkey didn't like Kurdish people, so they bombed and killed many Kurdish people, Kurdish fighters in Syria, and it helped Syrian government, which went against the U.S. Strategy. So it was quite complicated matters. Now, Syrian army, the political body in power threatens to topple Kurdish in favor of Turkey, right? Syrian army continues advance against Kurdish-held towns despite U.S. calls against it. Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF) fighters are deployed in Raqqa. Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF) fighters gather as they are deployed after days of clashes in eastern Aleppo in Raqqa, Syria, January 17, 2026. Deir Hafar, Syria, in January 17th. The Syrian army continued its push into Kurdish-held territory on Saturday, despite U.S. calls to halt its advance in towns in the area in Syria's north. State media said the army took over the northern city of Raqqa and its adjacent dam, as well as the major Freedom Dam, formerly known as the Bath, west of Syrian city of Raqqa. Syrian Kurdish authorities had not acknowledged their loss of control over those strategic points, and it was unclear if fighting was still ongoing. Ongoing, that's another good word, right? Ongoing. In Korea, we say ing, but actually the good word is still ongoing, right? Still ongoing. Let's remember that. So fighting was still ongoing. Ongoing. 4 days, Syrian troops had amassed around a cluster of villages that lie just west of the winding Euphrates and had called on the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces stationed there to redeploy their forces on the opposite bank of the river. They have been clashing over strategic posts and oil fields along the Euphrates River. SDF fighters withdrew from the area early on Saturday as a gesture of goodwill, but then accused the Syrian troops of violating the agreement by continuing to push further east into towns and oil fields not included in the deal. That's bad, right? As a gesture of goodwill, oil fields, right? Brad Cooper, who heads the U.S. military's Central Command, said in a written statement posted on X that Syrian troops should cease any offensive actions in areas between the city of Aleppo and the town of Raqqa, approximately 160 kilometers or 100 miles further east. Arab residents rejoice at troops' arrival. Really? That's true? A gesture of goodwill. A gesture of goodwill. The initial withdrawal deal included the main town of Deir Hafa and some surrounding villages whose residents are predominantly Arab. The SDF withdrew on Saturday and Syrian troops moved in relatively smoothly, with residents celebrating their arrival. It happened with the least amount of losses. There's been enough blood in this country, Syria. We have sacrificed and lost enough. People are tired of it. Hussein al-Khalef, a resident of Deir Hafa, told Reuters. The Syrian Petroleum Company said that the nearby oil fields of Rasafa and Sufyan had been captured by Syrian troops and could now be brought back online. Really? SDF forces had withdrawn east, some on foot towards the flashpoint town of Raqqa, downstream, but still on the western side of the river and near hydroelectric dam, a crucial source of power. But when Syria's army announced it aimed to capture Raqqa next, the SDF said that was not part of the original deal and that it would fight to keep the town as well as another oil field in its vicinity. Syria's army said 4 of its troops had been killed in attacks by Kurdish militants, and the SDF said some of its own fighters had been killed, but did not give a number. Give a number, right? Give a number. Did not let them know or announced how many people died, but the simple expression is give a number. U.S.-led coalition planes flew over the flashpoint towns, releasing warning flares, according to a Syrian security source. The U.S. has had to recalibrate its Syria policy to balance years of backing for the SDF, which fought against the Islamic State, against Washington's new support for Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa, whose rebel forces ousted dictator Bashar al-Assad in late 2024. That's another good expression, right? Ousted. Not ousted, but ousted. Ousted. Ousted, right? Main oil fields are still under Kurdish control. To try to end the fighting, U.S. envoy Tom Barack, Obama, right? Barack Obama traveled to Erbil in northern Iraq on Saturday to meet with both Abdi and Iraqi Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani, according to two Kurdish sources. There was no immediate comment from Barack's spokesperson. The latest violence has deepened the fault line between the government led by Sharaa, who has vowed to reunify the fractured country after 14 years of war, and local Kurdish authorities wary of its Islamist-led administration. The two sides engaged in months of talks last year to integrate Kurdish-run military and the civilian bodies into Syrian state institutions by the end of 2025, repeatedly saying that they wanted to resolve disputes diplomatically. But after the deadline passed with little progress, clashes broke out earlier this month in the northern city of Aleppo and ended with the withdrawal of Kurdish fighters. Syrian troops then amassed around towns in the northern and east to pressure Kurdish authorities into making concessions in the deadlocked talks with Damascus. Making concessions, right? Making concessions. Kurdish authorities still hold Arab-majority areas in the country's east that are home to many of Syria's largest oil and gas fields. Arab tribal leaders in SDF-held territory have told Reuters they are ready to take up arms against the Kurdish force if Syria's army issues orders to do so. Wow, it's getting complicated, right? Take up arms against the Kurdish force. Kurdish fears have been deepened by bouts of sectarian violence last year, when nearly 1,500 Alawites were killed by government-aligned forces in western Syria, and hundreds of Druze were killed in northern Syria, some in execution-style killings. That's terrible. That's terrible, man. Reporting by Mahmoud Hassano in Deir Haifa, Orhan Koreman in Tabqa, Khalil Ashawi in Damascus. Additional reporting by Muayyad Hamid Suadi in Baghdad, and Hussein Hayatseva in Ankara, that's Turkey. Writing in Maya Gebeli, editing by Barbara Lewis, Diane Kraft, Rod Nichol. Wow, so we learned many political expressions, right? Take up arms against the Kurdish force, still ongoing. Make concessions in the deadlocked deal, the flashpoint towns, right? The flashpoint towns make advance territory deal, ousted, right? Ousted, not ousted, but ousted. So let's check out anti-coercion instrument. Still ongoing as a gesture of goodwill. Oil fields, right? Oil fields. Making concessions, take up arms against the Kurdish force. Well, that's it, right? Thanks for listening. Have a great Tuesday. Bye-bye.